Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting of the Harwich Planning Board to order. It's Tuesday, March 12th. It's a little past 6:30. We're going to be recording and taping this meeting, and if there's anyone in the audience who would like to either record or tape, by law, you're required to inform us. So is there anyone that will be recording or taping this proceeding? Would you please identify yourself? Usually there isn't, so don't worry about it. So we will, we have a really slim agenda this evening, but a lot of important topics. So what I would ask those of you who are attending, if you would, when it comes time for public comment, you may, in order, step up to the podium. We'd love to have your input. Identify yourself and where you live, and then speak your piece.
There's also a sign-in sheet.
And true, there's a sign-in sheet. Thank you, Charlene. And so with that, I'd like to start with the public hearing. We have a zoning bylaw amendment. Charlene, do I need to read this into the?
It's a very lengthy one.
Yep.
So if the board does not want to read the whole the whole notice into the record, I will be going through it.
Okay.
But you do need to open the hearing on the first item, which is the single-family dwelling with accessory apartment.
Okay. And Joe, did you have a comment?
Mr. Chairman, can we place this item on the table and do the public hearing so that those folks who are here on the public hearing don't have to sit through?
Oh, the public meeting.
Yeah.
If I may,
Yes.
there are actually some folks who are here who need to be other places, and we're particularly here at 6:30
Okay.
to participate in the discussion. I don't know as these are going to be lengthy.
Okay.
Certainly the first one, I know there are people here who are time sensitive.
Okay. No worries. Let's stick to the agenda, and we'll try to move as quickly as possible. So we have the zoning bylaw amendments that are here for public hearing, and copies of the full notice for each item are attached to the web posting, and hard copies are posted and available in Town Hall. Three topics this evening. Number one is single-family dwelling with accessory apartment, freestanding portable sign, and retaining walls for septic systems. And item number three, special provisions for lifting existing structures to new appropriate levels.
You do need to open the hearing for the single-family dwelling with accessory apartment.
Okay. So we will, in accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 5,
You don't need to read the whole thing, just
Okay.
you need to open it.
So we will open this portion of today's meeting, zoning bylaw amendment for single-family dwelling with accessory apartment. Okay, Charlene.
Okay, so this is a bylaw that the Board of Selectmen as well as the Planning Board have been discussing since September to make some changes. It's a bylaw that exists currently within the zoning bylaw. It is allowable in a number of different districts, but by special permit. The amendment here would be to make it so this is no longer allowable by special permit, but by right. But it will still have certain criteria. So this first item that you see would be to amend the use table to change under the RR, RL, RM, RH1, CV, CH1, the MRL, MRL1, and the water recharge districts from special permit use to permitted use. It would also change the reference from section 325.51H to 325.14T, because it would be moving from the special permit list to other provisions list. And then there would be some numbering to get it all in line. And there are copies of this in the back of the room. Any deleted language is shown as strike-through. Any proposed language is shown as bold underline. So the purpose and intent of this bylaw has not changed at all, and I will read this in its entirety because I think it's very important. The intent of permitting accessory apartments is to, A, increase the number of small dwelling units available for rent in town, B, increase the range of choice of housing accommodations, C, encourage greater diversity of population with particular attention to young adults and senior citizens, and D, encourage a more economic and energy-efficient use of the town's housing supply while maintaining the appearance and character of the town's single-family neighborhoods. The definition of owner has remained the same. The criteria has essentially remained the same, except now it's going to be criteria for an allowable within a single-family dwelling, whether it's attached or detached. And it does have pretty much the same criteria. There's still only one apartment that's permitted for each dwelling. The accessory apartment may not be held in separate ownership, so it cannot be condoed. In item C, there is a change. The existing language says only one principal dwelling or accessory apartment may be rented at any given time. Added language is, if rented, shall be rented for a term of no less than 6 consecutive months. Thus, the importance of the purpose of this bylaw. The accessory apartment cannot exceed half of the net floor area of the principal dwelling, but not be more than 900 square feet. It cannot have more than 2 bedrooms. It must have at least 1 parking space for the accessory apartment. The square footage requirements for the lot size have not changed. Just very quickly, you can't have less than 15,000 square feet if you're in the RH1, CV, CH1, MRL, MRL1. You can't have less than 20,000 square feet if you're in the RL, RM, or RR districts, and 40,000 square feet if you're in the water recharge. One provision that we are proposing to be added is that for parcels existing within approved open space residential developments or cluster subdivisions, the size of the lot shall be consistent with the endorsed plan. Under our bylaw, we allow for parcels as small as 12,000 square feet, but it's still an aggregate of the whole area. So I'll use a round number, if you have 10,000 square feet, if you're in a water recharge area, you would be allowed 4 bedrooms per 40,000 square feet, so it roughly works out to 40 bedrooms. You're still allowed 40 bedrooms even if you're on those number of parcels, even if you're down to a 12,000 square foot lot. So it's the aggregate of the land area involved in that subdivision that gets added to, and the ability to have the number of bedrooms. The accessory apartment shall be designed so that it looks like it's part of the house or part of an accessory structure. The principal dwelling and the accessory apartment must meet all wastewater treatment criteria and requirements. The board did propose, and I agree with this, that the proposed use shall not create traffic hazards. That language has been taken out. It's a very subjective criteria. If you have 3 bedrooms, you're only gonna have so many cars, whether 2 bedrooms are in your main house and 1 is in the apartment. It's kind of a wash. The proposed use must meet all other zoning criteria, building and site coverage, setbacks, those kind of things. Added languages is that the building commissioner shall determine compliance with said criteria following receipt of the application for building permit for change of use and/or for construction of said accessory apartment. One thing I want to let folks know is anytime there's a building permit that goes to the building commissioner, it is routed through planning, conservation, health, and the fire department. So it is reviewed and scrutinized by all of those departments to ensure that it meets all these criteria. Because it's no longer going to be a special permit requirement, the requirement to record the decision of the registry of deeds has been stricken. Transfer of ownership language has been stricken so that the apartment runs with the property, not with the person.
Yep.
And there is a provision that if somebody is using it for something other than its intended use, which is a rental of 6 months or greater, If somebody's violating that, then they can be found that they're not in compliance with the bylaw, and they can have their permit null and voided, and they would have to remove the apartment. What I have here are some examples that I actually stole these from the town of Chatham, because she already created this, so I did borrow these. Here's an example of a detached structure. None of these are in Harwich. None of these were in Chatham. But they do give nice, examples. One is a two-car garage with living space above. Another is a smaller garage, looks kind of like a carriage house. Here are additions, that are attached, that are over garages, that they've made to fit in very nicely. And then here's a couple examples of existing houses where they've actually incorporated the apartment within the shell of the building. Just some ideas to show you. In 2010, the parents have a child, and they are living in the main house, and they have an apartment and rent that out. Their family gets bigger. They need the space where the apartment is, and they need to have more space for their own family. As they grow older in place, they may then move out to the accessory apartment and rent the main house. So it can be an evolution. Here are just some statistics on how many earners it takes to actually to be able to own a home or rent a home. I'm not going to go through those, but some of those statistics are pretty staggering. If you're in the healthcare, just for an example, healthcare and social assistance, you need just under 2 people to be able to own a home valued at $335,000. And one person can make it if they can afford a rent of $1,100. And what we have heard, not so much in Harwich, and I'm really pleased, but in some other communities, it's like, well, I was able to do it when I was younger. How come people can't do it now? Clearly, the median income for Barnstable County has not grown significantly since 1980. Back in 1980, the median income, and this is all adjusted for inflation using Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation calculator. In 1980, the average income was just over $34,000. Today, it's just over $36,000. The price of the home has gone from almost $176,000 to over $443,000. So those are just, and student debt, the average student debt back in 1980 was just over $12,000. Now it's just over $30,000. So those are just some statistics to just show why there's really a need for apartments in the community.
Yeah, that's staggering, that
Yes,
difference.
and I think it's all telling. So that is all I have, Mr. Chairman. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. Look at some pretty houses up there.
Okay,
If somebody wants to.
first of all, we'll get you up there. Are there any questions from the planning board? Anyone have any comments?
I do have one last thing.
Okay,
The
Charlene?
purpose of the zoning, the zoning public hearings this evening is to, present what the changes.
Yep.
Hear from the board members, hear from the public, and then ultimately, if the board is comfortable, the board will close the public hearing, and then we'll vote to recommend or not this article for approval at the town meeting.
Okay. So, are there any comments from the planning board?
No, sir.
Anyone? David?
No?
Okay. Sir?
And if you could sign in too.
This is a mystery guest. My name is Rick Roy. I'm a builder in Harwich, okay? And I think this is a great bylaw change, long time overdue, where I have a lot of employees that are always looking for housing, having these appurtenant apartments and so on and so forth would be great. My one question is that, as a builder, we often build people were asked about guest houses,
Yep.
okay? So, if the house or the apartment sits dormant, okay, it's not rented, all right, that doesn't create a violation. If a family member moves into it, okay, that also doesn't create a violation, correct? Because you've got the right number of bedrooms and you met all the zoning anyways.
Right.
So basically, when you showed that chart, when you showed that chart where it was, you had a smaller family and you rented it out to somebody, and then the family got bigger and you might have to take over the space, and then you might live in the appurtenant structure later on.
Yep.
The usage of it, as long as you're renting it and you're renting it for more than 6 months, really means that you have 2 dwellings on the property.
I believe so. Charlene?
Or Mary, do you want to?
Mary?
I'll say, from my perspective, the point of this was to help us have some additional worker housing. That's the point of the 6 months, is so that it's encouraging kind of year-round stays versus the 1 week, 2 week Airbnb situation. So from my perspective, that's what we were going for, and my understanding is exactly with what yours was. If it's your family staying there and they're coming down for summer vacations and they're staying in the accessory dwelling unit, that's not a violation. It's the rental itself.
Okay, that's all I wanted to know, because people, my clients would be asking, for all intents and purposes, it's like, if you meet the criteria, the square footage that's been put forth for the different zoning,
Yeah,
you're actually able to put another structure on your part with a kitchen,
yeah.
okay? And
Yeah.
even if you were, there's no ever any intent to have to take the kitchen out to make it a bunkhouse or something else
Right.
like that. So now the bylaw allows you to have 2 dwelling spaces.
So, Mr. Roy, I have a question for you, if you don't
Okay.
mind. So is what we're doing and proposing, is that, in your opinion, helpful? Is that something that will be?
Oh, absolutely. I think that it should be adopted in pretty much all the towns. I mean, there's, my business and businesses like any of the hotels and restaurants that have to have people working there. There aren't any places for people to stay in the summertime. There's no dormers like there were at CBI or whatever the story is. So this is the way you have to be able to take care of it. Plus, if you are able to afford to put the structure up, all right, it is, and pay for it, it is an investment, and it does help the family with extra income.
Sure.
So
Sure,
I
yeah.
think it's a good thing.
Rick, don't leave for a minute.
Oh, God.
One more.
You're building a new house down on the edge of
Uh-oh.
the campgrounds?
Yes.
Just tore a house down, and you've got a garage and a main structure. Is the garage, over the garage in that new property that you're building, is that an apartment?
No. No.
Because you couldn't
Now you
do
could do it under the new bylaw. I
But
would
now
assume.
you could do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
If you have the right land area. I don't know how
Yeah,
big the
you gotta
lot
meet
is
all the
down
other
there.
criteria, so
I understand.
Yeah,
I
no,
was
that's
with it.
good.
Because I know that in other towns, if you want to put a guest house on a property, you have to have 20,000 square feet more, okay, than, and so this is substantially different.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sir?
Hi, hello, John Jory, I live in 153 Gorham Road in Harwich.
Can you sign in, John?
Sure. And my question is just for my own clarification, and I may be reading this wrong, but I read it,
Excuse me.
and if rented, shall be rented for a term of no less than 6 consecutive months. How does that, if you rent an apartment or your house for a week, that's less than a consecutive month? How does that interfere with that?
It wouldn't, if you own a single-family dwelling and you are going to Montana for the summer and you're renting your home out weekly, you can continue to do so. You
But it says
can't
here-
That
rent
is
both
my
of them.
question.
If you have an accessory apartment and a main dwelling, you can only rent one of those out at any given time.
Correct, but it also says no less than, so if I have a main dwelling and I have an accessory apartment, which I don't have an accessory apartment, but if I did,
You can only rent one of those out at any given time, and it would be not for less than 6 months. So you can't rent your main house out weekly and rent your apartment out for more than 6 months.
And if I may, you can't rent both, right?
Right, you can't
The
rent
purpose
both.
of the accessory dwelling unit bylaw is to have owner occupancy in one of the two units, whether it's the main house or the accessory dwelling unit, and then the other unit can be rented for no less than 6 months at a time.
So if I had an accessory apartment, I could rent it weekly if I wanted to?
No.
No,
No. Well, how would that, why not?
Because you can't rent it for, if rented, only one of the principal dwelling or accessory apartment may be rented at any given time, and if rented, shall be rented for no term for a term of no less than 6 consecutive months. You can rent one or the other, but not less than 6 months.
so if I could, on a follow-up to what Charlene said, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
This is different than having a two-family. If you were in a zoning district that allowed a two-family, then that's different. A two-family would be allowable, both could be rented at the same time. The accessory dwelling unit is giving you a benefit by being able to have a second apartment on the same lot with typically lower square footage than a two-family or two separate units would be allowable in that zoning district. So the benefit you're getting in that situation is to have the second apartment. The restriction is that you can't rent both at the same time, and the one that does get rented can only be rented for 6 months.
Can't be rented not less than 6 months?
Not less than 6 months. Or it can be rented for a year. It
Yeah.
can be rented for two.
So if I did have an accessory apartment and I moved into the accessory apartment, would this prohibit me from renting my house on a weekly basis?
Yes.
Yes.
On a
Yes.
weekly, yes,
Yes.
on a weekly basis.
See, I think that they're gonna hurt people doing that, because if people do have an accessory apartment and a house, now you've precluded them from renting it on a weekly basis. You've effectively killed that, that's my understanding. And we just have this huge tax that's coming forward now. It's gonna affect a lot of people doing that, I think, because I know a number of people that have accessory apartments now that rent it out on Airbnb on a weekly basis now. This law will prevent those people from doing that, is that correct? As
No.
proposed? No?
No.
If you have a special permit for if you have a lawfully existing apartment right now that you've got a special permit for from the planning board, you can rent it out any which way you want.
Yeah.
Because you got your special permit. What this is going to do now is say, if you want an accessory apartment, you can have it by right, but here is this criteria that you now need to follow. So,
So you're excluding those people now. So if I decide to build an accessory apartment now, you're telling me
the whole
I
purpose
can't
of
rent
it,
it out?
I'm gonna go back to the purpose and intent of what this bylaw is all about. And it is to create a wide range choices of housing accommodations to encourage greater diversity of population with particular attention to young adults and senior citizens, and encourage more economic and energy efficient use of housing supply. The purpose of this bylaw is to create housing for
Worker housing.
longer term rental.
Well, I understand that.
It's
but
not for, it's
But you're
not,
excluding people, though. You're excluding, if I wanted to build an accessory apartment now and rent it out on a weekly basis, you're saying I can't. Whereas I could have before under a special permit.
technically, under the Harwich zoning bylaw, Airbnb is not a lawful use. So if anybody's doing that out there, you know, we're not chasing you down, but Airbnb on a nightly, you know, 2-night minimum rental is not an allowable use under our zoning bylaw at all. So,
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about.
well, you mentioned
the-
Airbnb.
Yeah, well, but if I decide to build an accessory apartment now, you're saying I can't rent it out on a weekly basis.
That's right.
That's right.
And I think that's wrong, because you're excluding people that want to build an accessory apartment and do want to rent it out. You know, did you think about that?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's why the purpose and intent of the bylaw is what the purpose
I
and
think
intent
it
of the
probably
bylaw
should
is.
say that the people that want to do that can apply for a special permit, like the existing rules right now, which they can now. Why couldn't they apply now on a special permit? what precludes them from, it's not that much of a hindrance to get a special permit to build an accessory apartment now.
In many cases, it's money.
It's just the permit,
It,
$350 permit.
it's $525 to come before this board for a special permit. It's the
Okay, you
hiring of,
raised the rates
it's the
then?
hiring of an attorney, it's, you know, there are a lot of illegal apartments out there right now that this may help to get legalized for people who are renting them on a long-term basis. I mean, I'm not gonna debate it, there's a reason for this, and I
I'm
think
just trying to
that reason's
understand
been
it.
made.
It seems like you're excluding people
Charlie,
here.
and I have a question. If this unit is not rented, if neither the house or the accessory apartment is not rented, does that prevent the owner from allowing family and friends to use it at a no-fee basis?
Not at all.
No.
We have somebody on this board who does that right now.
Yeah, it doesn't matter whether it's the
Yeah.
board or not.
Yeah.
It won't preclude.
No, it's just as an example, you
Yep.
know, if you want to create an accessory apartment and you don't want to rent it at all, but you want to have it as extra overflow for family members,
Yep.
then you can do that. There's
Yep.
nothing precluding you from doing that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yep, you have it.
I just want to, that's how I thought it was being read.
Yeah.
So you're.
No, you read it correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're telling people now if they want an accessory apartment and they want to rent it out on a weekly basis, they can't do it. It's
Correct.
basically what it is.
Correct.
And I think that's probably wrong, I think, you know? It's just not right. You know, you're telling people they can't do an apartment now,
Yeah.
unless and telling them that they can only rent it for 6 months or more.
Yeah.
Doesn't preclude them for going for a special permit for a two-family dwelling, provided they
Yeah.
can meet that criteria.
So they still have the option then of applying for a special permit.
For a two-family dwelling if they meet the criteria,
Yeah.
which has different criteria than an apartment.
Okay. I still think it's not, I applaud the intent of it. It's a
Yep.
great way to do that. But you're Xing out folks here that
Yeah.
are supplementing their income on a
Okay.
weekly basis.
Thank you very much for your input. Thank you. Yeah. Next.
Hello, my name's Marcel Vigneault. I'm at 265 Depot Road.
Just so we get spellings
Yep.
correctly in the minutes.
And I just wanted to say, I'm coming from a housing aspect. I actually work with the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe with their housing department, and it is extremely hard finding housing at any level, whether they have an MRVP, Section 8.
Yep.
So I think, and I've been a resident in Harwich for over 20 years, so I'm happy to see this happening. I think it's needed. Like over 20 years ago, I rented a whole house for $625, a single-family dwelling. So that's long ago. I've been on here. The only question I have in regards to doing the accessory dwelling, when the town comes in, how often would they inspect, or what would the criteria be for them to inspect the accessory dwelling?
Inspection of the accessory
I don't
dwelling.
believe that there is an inspection. If
Okay.
No
there
building
is,
inspection.
No.
if there's if it's rented under the, we do have an existing general bylaw, which is the rental something bylaw.
Yeah.
It escapes me at the moment. That is I believe, a yearly or a one-time, and there's an inspection involved there. But that's under the general bylaw, and if you're renting for long-term, it does not trigger that.
Okay. And are they restricted as far as what they request for rents? Like, is there?
No.
No, they are not. We hope that people will be
Yeah.
good people and
Look to help.
not charge exorbitant amounts of money.
Okay. All right. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you very much. Sir?
Mr. Chairman, Richard Waystack, Harwich, and I rise to speak in favor of the bylaw. And I bring many hats to the table. I'm a member of the Cape Cod and Islands Association of Realtors that are supporting this throughout the Cape as a way to alleviate some of the housing issues. I also serve this town on the Board of Assessors and the Council on Aging. And we have found at the Council on Aging that the majority of our seniors wish to age in place.
Yes.
On the other side, if I'm a member of the Board of Assessors, we deal with over 240 people who look for assistance, who are seniors in this community, who get one form of assistance or another. Many times they're overhoused, and they can't afford to live in a house, and they're a very proud generation. You know, they don't want to take that the reverse mortgage out. They don't want to look for help. They want to leave it to the next generation debt-free. But they want to age in place. And this will allow people to do that, and it's a great option for people. I'm also a landlord. I own a number of properties in town, and I put an ad in a couple weeks ago for a 2-bedroom in this town. And it was not in the newspaper. It was on social media. I had 25 inquiries in a matter of 5 hours for a 2-bedroom apartment in town. I can't imagine if I had put it in the newspaper what kind of reaction I would have had to it. This solves many, many problems, and I think having it permitted as an allowed use rather than a special permit, you will see, and you hear our builders who are embracing this, that they know it can be embraced throughout our community. It's a great option to increase housing for both, and it will alleviate some of the issues that our seniors are facing. So I commend you for bringing this forward, and I highly recommend that you approve it.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you very much. You know what, I think if anyone has any doubts about what we're doing or why we're doing it, if you look at the slide that Charlene put up a little while ago, and you look at this is staggering. I mean, as a community, we talk about our younger folks. We talk about our senior citizens and those on a fixed income. I mean, the fact that you look at you've more than doubled the price of housing, and yet your income has only increased by $2,000. I mean, if we're not acting on this, we're not being responsible. So, ma'am, please.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jenny Hewitt. I live
Jenny.
on Main Street. There's a huge housing crisis on the Cape. I've heard it referred to as an economic death spiral, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So I'm very much in favor of affordable housing. In particular, I'm very supportive of this proposed change in the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, where you can have that by right and not by special permit. Anything that makes it easier to create these units and to streamline the process can't help but be beneficial. You still have to meet the other requirements, so it should be wastewater neutral. I live on the corner of Main Street and Chatham Road, and I've been there 18 years. I raised 3 children there. So there were 4 of us in that house at one time. My children left for college. Fortunately, I have one of them back here now, living with me. And so at some time in the future, we'll be looking at creating an accessory dwelling unit. If, for some reason he moves out and gets his own place, then that gives me some income. I worry all the time about whether I can afford to stay here when I retire, a town that I've lived in for 20 years. And, put down roots, and I want to stay here in my retirement. Then I'll have some income if that happens. On the other hand, if my son gets married and has a family, I might be the one in the accessory dwelling unit. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to leave the clutter behind and move into the nice new part. Like, I like that idea. So with the high cost of housing, that may be the only way he can afford a home here.
Yep.
So I see it's a tremendous benefit to young people, but also to seniors. There's a lot of seniors living by themselves in the community, and the chance to have some income, but also the security of having someone nearby if something happens, or maybe shovel snow or things like that. So many of our neighborhoods are empty in the winter, and that's not good when you're living by yourself.
Yep.
So I think it's a win-win. No one has to choose to build an accessory dwelling unit, but to have the option is very much needed. And rental units is the highest need. But whenever affordable housing projects come up, no one wants to do that, and we haven't done that, I don't believe, in recent years anyway. So it doesn't add to density, and it doesn't affect wastewater. I really can't see any reason why we wouldn't do it. And Charlene, I very much liked your slide presentation. I feel like this is me, your little life story there.
Yeah.
So thank you. I hope that this passes.
So I really, really, on behalf of our board, appreciate you speaking up like this. I think it's great. I would encourage you to please come to the town meeting, because I think our selectmen need to hear this message too.
Thank you.
Well, they're actually very supportive of this.
Yeah.
You know, that's why it is what it is.
Mr. Waystack knows exactly what I'm talking about. So, hello.
Hi, good evening. My name is Donna Hellenic. I live on Haskell Lane. I want to commend you for the work that you've done as a planning board on this bylaw, and also the work that Charlene has done.
Yeah.
This is really important to the housing crisis that we're all facing on the Cape. I work for the town of Brewster. We recently passed a revised ADU bylaw at our December town meeting successfully and by majority. And as you probably know, the towns of Chatham and Dennis are also looking at revised ADU bylaws. So I thank you for this work. I will support this. And I very much appreciate the fact that you included statistics that paint a picture of the crisis that we're really facing. So thank you.
You're quite welcome. And I think it's important that we talk about statistics as much as we can, because that data will tell us what the problem is. And too often, we get up and talk about things without using hard data. And believe me, for those of us who've spent a career in industry, that's what you have to manage with. It's not a, well, I think, or you manage with data and you manage with facts. And that's what this is. And that's why we're doing it. It's the right thing to do.
And even more important than that is if you can encourage people, young people,
Yep.
Older people, to tell their story and their struggle with finding housing on the Cape. And it isn't just low income. It's
No.
low, it's median, it's workforce housing, it's everyone.
Yeah.
And so it's important to back up the data with the stories. Since we passed our bylaw and it hasn't even been approved by the AG's office yet, we already have had multiple inquiries and we already have 2 people in process. So there are people who want to use this bylaw and use it in the way that it's intended, which is to create more year-round housing.
Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you.
Thank you very much. And I want everybody who's sitting here and who's listening to know what a great job that Charlene has done on this, because without a town planner that's as involved as she is and listens, we wouldn't be able to do things like this. So thanks very much, Charlene. Hi.
Kathy Green.
Hi, Kathy.
I'm currently Vice Chair of the Community Preservation Committee and Chair of the Real Estate and Open Space Committee, and recently attended a community housing workshop.
Yeah.
And in my capacity in working with these committees, we continue to get an increases in requests on how to deal with the housing issues.
Yeah.
And we all know that it's just a huge issue. And if we could do anything, even if it's a small step, to try to, take it apart, it would be better. It just increases the diversity in the types of housing that are available. When I think about the construction workers, the landscapers, the service industry people, teachers,
Yep.
police support staff, fire support staff that are traveling over the bridge
Right.
in the morning and coming back in the evening, if we could reduce our carbon footprint by not having that happen, that would be great. So I'm in favor of the proposed bylaw change.
Well, thank you so much. Anyone else? Anybody? Okay, Charlene?
So at this point, if the board is comfortable with closing the public hearing, you would need to do so, and then you would need to have a motion to either recommend or not recommend this to the town meeting.
Okay.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor by roll call. First, Mr. Harris.
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes carry.
Close the public hearing.
Okay. And then we proceed with a,
motion to recommend this article to the town meeting.
okay,
Move to recommend the article to town meeting.
Great motion, Joe.
yeah. Okay, seconded. We'll take a vote now by roll call. Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McParland?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Aye. Carries?
Thank you very much.
Okay, next. We have freestanding portable sign and retaining walls for septic systems, correct?
Yes, so you need to open that public hearing.
Yep.
Move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, on the motion to move, open the public hearing, roll call vote, Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McParland?
Aye.
Ms. Maslowski?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, it's now open.
Okay. So, want me to do this?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So, in our existing bylaw, we have a definition of A-frame, easel, sandwich board signs. However, that's all we have. There's no criteria for it, there's no nothing, with the exception that any signage counts toward your overall allowed signage, which in general is 48,000 square feet. There's some caveats here and there. One thing I do want to say is that, we did get a letter from a nonprofit, and I neglected to bring that, but it was the Harwich Port Library, asking about nonprofits. They're exempt from zoning, so they are exempt from signage issues. So all that being said. So last summer, there were an abundance, an overabundance in some people's minds for A-frame signs. Once again, the planning board and the Board of Selectmen met in September, had a conversation regarding this, and this board was asked to look at that. So we have gone over probably a dozen iterations of this.
Yeah.
And we've come up with, when I say we, I mean the planning board has come up with a new definition, getting rid of A-frame, easel, sandwich board signs, and having a new definition of freestanding portable signs with a definition of a single or double-faced, self-supporting sign made of cardboard, plastic, metal, or other lightweight and rigid materials. Along with that, criteria was established on the size, location, etc. And I can run through these really quick. You do need a building permit. The area shall not be more than 6 square feet. The sign height above the ground shall not exceed 3 feet, and the sign width shall not exceed 2 feet. So you can either have a 3-foot high sign that's 2 feet wide, or a 2-foot wide sign that's 3 feet wide.
Right.
The sign cannot be lit, it cannot be audible, it can have no moving parts except for the hinge necessary to open and close your sign. The sign shall be stable and have no external supports. The sign area, only one side of it, not both, only one side, will count toward your maximum total allowable signage in square feet, and it does refer you to that section of the bylaw, so you can figure out what that is. But again, in general, it's 48 square feet. That's a lot of sign. That is a lot of signage. The sign shall not indicate more than the name of the business, a special event, hours of operation, sale of a product or service, and the price. You are allowed only one freestanding sign per business, and a business with frontage on 2 streets may actually have one on each street. So if you front on Main Street and front on Smith Street, you can have a sign on each of those, provided it's not in the road right-of-way, it is on your own property, etc. If you are in a building that has multiple businesses, each business would be allowed one of these signs, regardless of street frontage. So if you're in a multiple-unit building that happens to be on the corner of Main and Smith, you can't have them on both. You can only have one sign, period, because we don't want sign pollution. The sign may only be displayed up to 2 hours before the business is open to the general public and may be there during business hours. So if you open at noon, your sign can go up at 10. If you close at 10 o'clock, your sign should come in at 10 p.m. And there's other requirements. I made a little diagram today, which I hope will be helpful. If it's not, tell me it's really bad, and, and I will never show this again. Here's a parcel, shown in the white, with its property line shown in red. You have a retail shop with a little walkway in the front, and you have your parking area. You have, I made it Route 28, and then you have a sidewalk, which is located both within the street right-of-way as well as on the property owner's property. And the little green triangle is an example of where a portable sign could be located. As you can see, it is not on the sidewalk. In this particular diagram, it's not on the sidewalk. It is on their own property.
Yep.
So it can't be below that red line, because then it would be on the town or the state property. So it has to be on the property in which it serves. In some cases, you may be able to have it on the sidewalk that you own, provided you're not inhibiting anybody's ability to traverse that sidewalk. We certainly don't want, and this is one of the things
Access
that
and egress. Yep.
precipitated this last year, we did have a visually impaired individual in town who actually crashed into one of these A-frame signs that was located on a sidewalk. So this is to deter that. So this little diagram, I hope, explains a little bit better what the intent is of this bylaw.
Thank you very much, Charlene. And I think, you know, the fact that we did have folks in here to talk about this, visually impaired, we reviewed the safety requirements of our emergency responders for access and egress. I think it was really well done, and I want to give Mr. Harris full credit for the various criteria that he put together, items 1 through 11, which I think are quite good.
Yes.
So what's our next step here?
I have
Yep.
one question.
Yep.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Charlene, K4, it should be 2 feet, I think. It says 3 feet in the copy that I'm looking at.
No, you can, no, actually,
Okay.
it's not wrong.
All right, as long as it can,
Yep, it can't be wider than 3 feet,
it can't be taller
and it
than,
can't be taller than 3 feet.
it's
So
three
and it
by-
can't exceed 6.
Right.
Right, so it can
Got
be
it.
3
Okay.
feet tall and 2 feet wide, or it can be 3 feet wide and 2 feet tall.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep.
You're welcome.
Joe?
Or 2.5 by 2.5.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Joe.
I'm a little bit concerned about item number 10. And the fact of the matter is that, and I think mostly about downtown Howardsport, of course, because I live nearby. The fact of the matter is that the folks that put those signs up do not do it 2 hours before. And they put them up and leave them up all summer, has been my experience down there. So,
And if I might, through you,
what if
Mr.
they
Chairman,
don't do this?
then they would be in violation of the zoning bylaw, and they would probably first get a warning, and then they would be fined.
Right.
Is there a provision for a fine?
There is a provision for a
Yes.
fine
Yeah.
in the
And-
sign
And
code.
who does that, the building inspector?
Building inspector,
inspector.
or building department, yes.
I'm not so sure I'm gonna move to take it out. I just wanna bring it to the attention that could be a problem, I think. Just my opinion.
Do you think they're gonna be left
You
overnight?
think they'll be
Oh,
left
I
all
know
the
they
time?
do, they do now.
Yeah.
They put them up in June, take them down in September. I mean,
Well, that's gonna be a problem, and
yeah,
it has
I know,
been.
that's why I brought it up.
Yep. And if you may, remember, we did have a meeting here where the chamber members were invited,
Yes.
and the building commissioner was here. And he said last year, they were fairly lenient, but that's gonna change.
Yep.
Just because it's not right.
And I believe we had a discussion, too, about having a law in place like this and not being able to enforce it. So, I mean, to Joe's point,
Right. Now they're gonna need building permits. We
Right.
permitted the very first freestanding portable sign a couple weeks ago.
are there any more comments from our board?
This is Dave, I have one. This is really prompted by that little triangular symbol that Charlene used in the example.
Okay.
The way this is worded, this is a single or double-faced sign. There's another configuration that would be equally stable, and that is a triangular one that's sort of like a cylinder except a triangle, where you could have the sign on two faces and have the a blank face facing the building. The way this is worded, it would probably generate a requirement for an interpretation.
It's only allowed to be two sides. You can't have a.
Wait a minute, let me finish. A single or double-faced self-supporting sign. If there's no sign, nothing printed on the third side, someone could make an argument that they could design something of that configuration and it would technically comply. Personally, I don't see a problem with that, but I just wanted to raise that as a possible flaw.
If I might, my triangle was intended to look like an A-frame sign from.
No, I understand it,
Yeah.
but that's what prompted my question.
Yeah.
I don't know if I explained it clearly enough. It's in my mind, but I'm not sure if I transferred it too effectively.
Yeah.
As long as it's not higher than 3 feet or wider than 2 feet in any which direction.
It doesn't have a surface area of more than 6 square feet.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to see how, if other people would interpret it the way I just have.
Anybody?
I would certainly hope not.
Yeah, I hope so. But I'm glad, David, that you have that critical approach because it makes us think, and that's a good thing, so.
Yeah, in my mind, it would not violate the intent of this rule. It would just give it a slightly different configuration.
Yep. Okay, good deal.
I think Mr. Waystack.
So we have a a gentleman from our community.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Roy just asked a question, how is it going to impact a builder's sign on a property?
That
not
falls
a
under a different
freestanding
section
sign.
of the bylaw.
Quick question on this, if I can, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman,
Yep.
through you to the town planner. Is there any language in there relative to, I'm more concerned about corner lots with infringing views for traffic?
There is a section of the existing sign code that says you cannot impede the vision, whether it's vehicular or pedestrian.
Yep.
Thank you.
So it is in the sign code, just not in this. This refers back to it.
Just so everybody in the audience knows, we even had the pastor of St. Peter's Church come because they've got on 137, they have a sign up there that's usually pretty humorous every week, and it's, they were concerned about not being able to have that sign, right? So we assured them that that was something that we were all for, so. Yeah, right, so. Any other?
Are nonprofits exempt from 325-26?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So they could put one on the sidewalk or out in the middle of the street?
No, they cannot.
No,
That they cannot do.
no.
They're exempt from
Because-
they're exempt from reasonable provisions. Putting it on the sidewalk is not reasonable.
Yeah.
Several times in the past year, I've seen their A-frame sign that is just literally blocking the curb cut, where it's sitting right on top of the yellow
Won't be
rail
doing that
designation.
Yeah.
I assume that the building commissioner would be responsible for citing those violations.
Yeah, I'm not following your description, but that's okay. I mean, if they're blocking their own curb cut, well, that's not bright,
No.
but
Counterproductive.
It's the ADA curb cut.
That's right.
oh, then that's a no-no. Yeah,
That's a violation,
That's a
David.
violation.
Yeah. That's a good point.
That is a violation. I wasn't following what you were saying. I'm sorry.
Any
That's okay. I finally figured out calling it the ADA curb cut made it clearer.
Yes,
Yeah.
that helped.
It is, yep. Anything else, David?
No, sir.
Any other comments from the board, public? Motion to
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a roll call vote, starting first with Mr. Harris. David?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Oh, excuse me. No, you're not closing the public hearing yet. The reason why is the sign code and the retaining wall are in the same zoning, or in the
Aha.
same article.
Septic.
Withdraw.
Change my vote to
I
nay.
withdraw my motion.
Okay. Sorry about that. On this one, I don't have a nice graphic.
All right.
So the second
okay.
one has to do with
Septic.
retaining walls for septic system. What happens now is if somebody has the need to construct a septic system with a retaining wall, and it is within the setback, and keeping in mind from the road it's 25 feet, and from a sideline it's 20 feet, if they need to be closer than that, they actually have to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance for the structure.
Correct.
Felt that that was a little bit too much. So did a little bit of research. We had several iterations of this. The board has been talking about this one since September as well. So the thought process was to, in the use table, or the dimensional requirements table, add a third footnote to read, may be reduced to 10 feet for septic systems pursuant to 325-18R. And then we're proposing a new section 18R, which says, are retaining walls for septic systems, provisions of 325-17 notwithstanding, which is a previous section, an improved parcel, on an improved parcel, a retaining wall associated with the installation of a septic system, e.g. a mounted septic system, required by Board of Health and/or Title V, shall be set back no less than 10 feet to any lot line. So it would allow for the system to be up to 10 feet
Up
to
to
the
10 feet,
property
yep,
line.
yep.
Originally, we had 0.
Yep.
Mr. McParlin wasn't comfortable with that, and I don't think the rest of the board
Okay.
was comfortable with that, and that's okay.
Yep.
So we did decide, because under Title V requirements, without a variance, you can only be 10 feet to a lot line anyway, so we stuck with that.
Yep.
So if somebody needs to be 5 feet from the lot line, they'll still need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay. Any comments from the board?
I have none.
Anyone? David?
None.
No.
Any comments from the public?
Nope. Now you can close if you like.
Okay.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second. By roll call, Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McParlin?
Aye.
Ms. Maslowski?
Aye.
Ms. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Joyce? Aye.
I would recommend that the board hold 2 separate votes on these, because they will appear individually within the actual warrant. So it would be the same as before, to a motion to recommend this to the town meeting.
Okay. Do I hear a motion regarding freestanding portable signs first?
Move to recommend the proposed language as set out in our document.
Section 325-26K.
6K.
Yes.
To the town meeting.
Okay. Okay, by roll call, Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McParlin?
Aye.
Ms. Maslowski?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Joyce? Aye.
And move to amend or add a new section, 325-18R, retaining walls for septic systems. The provisions of 325-17 notwithstanding, on an improved parcel, a retaining wall associated with the installation of a septic system, e.g. Mounted septic system, required by the Board of Health under and/or Title V, shall be set back no less than 10 feet to any lot line.
Mary?
If I may offer an amendment,
Sure.
I think we just want to
Recommend this article to the
Recommend the-
town meeting.
Yep.
recommend the article relative to the zoning bylaw changes relative to retaining walls and septic systems, because I believe we are amending both 325-16,
And,
a table,
Yes.
Yeah.
and adding a section.
I accept the amendment.
so redo the vote?
There was no vote.
There wasn't a vote, it was just a motion.
Yep.
Okay, then we're,
But you need a second on the motion.
okay. Second? Do I hear a second?
Second, yes.
Okay. By roll call, Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McParland?
Aye.
Ms. Meslowski?
Aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Aye.
Mr. Joyce? Aye. It's moved. Next.
You need to open the next one.
Oh, you're so helpful. Okay, the,
Straight and narrow.
yeah, we're on number 3, special provisions for lifting existing structures. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 5, the Harwich Planning Board will hold a public hearing Tuesday, March 12, no earlier than 6:30 PM, Don B. Griffin Room, Harwich Town Hall, 732 Main Street, Harwich, to consider amendments to the Harwich zoning codes.
You don't need to read the whole thing. You can just say, open the special provisions for lifting structures.
So I will repeat, as Charlene has indicated, the zoning bylaw article, special provisions for lifting existing structures to new appropriate elevations. Okay,
Motion to open.
motion to open.
Move to open the public hearing.
Second.
A vote via roll call, Mr. Harris.
Aye.
Mr. McParland.
Aye.
Mary.
Excuse me.
Aye.
Alan.
Aye.
Mr. Joyce, aye.
Okay, so this is another situation where if you have an existing structure and you want to elevate it so as to get it out, the first floor out of the base flood elevation, and you happen to be higher than 30 feet when you're done, you need to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variance. Again, felt that that was a little bit too restrictive. Did a little research and found that the town of Dennis actually had a very good bylaw that they actually borrowed from the state of New Jersey.
New Jersey, yep,
Following Hurricane Sandy.
Sandy, yep.
As you know, that did a lot of devastation, so they wanted to try and, circumvent any future issues with the ability to rebuild or elevate or what have you. So essentially what this does is it allows provisions to lift an existing structure if it's in an area of special flood hazard concern to a new and appropriate elevation. We do have some safeguards in here that cannot go, you can't raise it so high that you get this great view and block somebody behind you.
Yep.
You can only raise it to a certain level that is appropriate for the flood district that you may be in. I can get more in-depth into this if people would like, and I'm happy to do that, but essentially that's what this is. And we do define a tenant structure, existing structure, highest applicable flood, and the key to me is the new and appropriate elevation, means any elevation to which a structure is raised or is to be raised that is equal to or higher than the applicable FEMA-based flood elevation, provided, however, in no case shall the new or appropriate elevation exceed the highest applicable flood elevation standard. So right now, the code says you have to be 2 feet above base flood elevation.
Yep.
If you only need to go 3 feet above that, that's where you get to go.
Okay.
And I do have a little graphic, could not find too many good ones on this. I was hoping to find one. But the picture on the left actually shows where the top of the floor is, where the base flood elevation is, and also shows some entry for flood waters. The visual on the right shows an actual home that is being elevated to the elevation. This is only a 1-story. Most of ours are 2 stories. But, in many of the communities, especially down down south and stuff, where this obviously is taken because there's palm trees and we don't have those. The height limitations may be drastically different. They may only have a 20-foot height elevation. But this at least will give you an example of what we mean by elevating it to the appropriate height.
Anything else, Charlene?
That's all I have on that one.
Any comments from the planning board?
Yeah, this is Dave. I think in time we're going to find this is entirely inadequate. And the reason is that sea level changes have increased by at least an inch in the last 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is that for thousands and thousands of square miles, there's another inch of water on top of the ocean. When you have hurricanes pushing and nor'easters pushing that water into a few hundred square miles at the shore, that means that the level, the flood elevations are going to be dramatically higher. So this is something that FEMA has been pondering over, and they recognize the difficulty of the conflict with zoning regulations and height limits. But we're going to see in the future, if ocean levels continue to rise and the increased storms continue, increased violence of the storms continue, this is going to be a real problem.
It could be. I think, David, your point is valid, but I do believe that for this period of time, and at least for the next 100 years, we're hoping that it will be somewhat adequate and based on what we know, the best available knowledge.
And if I might, I mean,
I'm not suggesting a change. I'm just pointing out the fact.
No, it's good point.
And I think he raises,
It's a
in my
valid
opinion, a
point.
very valid point.
Yep.
And I think that's why when the last building code was done, they increased it to 2 feet above base flood elevation.
Yep.
Originally, it was only at base flood elevation.
Yep.
So now it's 2 feet above, so we're getting there, you know, but I like to call it baby steps,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Okay, that's good. Thank you very much, David. Any other comments by the board? Any comments at all from the audience? Anyone? Okay. So, Charlene, you would like us to recommend?
Close this public hearing.
Yep.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Okay, by roll, David?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Jim? Aye.
And then I would ask that the board act on a motion to recommend the article for special provisions for lifting existing structures to new appropriate elevations to the town meeting.
Okay.
So moved.
Second. I was just gonna say.
Yeah, so moved and seconded. So by roll call, David?
Aye.
Joe?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Jim? Aye.
We don't have to read it into the record, do we?
No, you don't, sir.
Okay.
They're all good.
There's a,
Public hearings are complete.
okay, so, public hearing is complete. Thank you very much for the work, and thank everybody in the audience for their contributions. The next portion of the meeting, of course, is a public meeting, new business. Charlene, read this in.
You can just say that there's an A&R
Okay.
for Paul Cuddy,
Yep.
case number 19.
Yep, so we have a PB 2019-11, Paul J. Cuddy, trustee, Sylvester Realty Trust, care of Moran Engineering Associates, LLC, seeks endorsement of a 2-lot approval not required, A&R, plan entitled Plan of Land in Harwich, Massachusetts, prepared for Paul Cuddy, trustee, dated 2/25/19, prepared by Moran Engineering Associates, LLC, pursuant to the Mass General Code, Chapter, Section 81P and Section 400-9 of the codes of the town of Harwich for property located at 0 Orleans Road at the end of Spence's Trace, map 86, parcel M7-A. The parcels are in the R-R and the C-H-2 Six Ponds and WR zoning districts. Sir.
Good evening, Dan Croto from Moran Engineering. This is submitted as an A&R. It's a division of a lot that was shown on the previous A&R, 61697, a recorded lot. The property itself is in 2 different lots. It's in 2 different zones. Commercially zoned district, CH2, and residential zoning district. A portion of the lot that's in the residential district is large enough to meet all the requirements of a residential lot, even within the 6 ponds districts and the strict requirements there. We did go through the process of showing that it met the shape number of a buildable lot. So the idea here is just a division which allows the owner to sell this lot to one of the commercial abutters, or combine the lot with one of the commercial abutters. I'm hoping it's a simple division plan.
Charlene?
So, as the board may know, for an approval not required plan, you have 3 options. You can vote to endorse the A&R, you can deny the A&R, specifically detailing why it does not meet the necessary requirements, or you can take no action, which would then result in town clerk certifying. The proposal meets the minimum criteria for, in my opinion, for endorsement of an A&R pursuant to section 400-9 of the Harwich Code and pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81K through GG, adequate frontage for zoning district with adequate access. Lot 1A has frontage on Spence's Trace. There is a note on the plan referencing the further compliance with planning board approval from PB, that should be 2006-49 regarding the construction of the cul-de-sac. Lot 1B is intended to be transferred to an abutting lot that contains the required frontage. Conservation had no comments, and Health did. Bear with me a second. Oh my God, I've lost it. Katie, do you remember?
It was just that when it is divided, if it's above 2,000 gallons per day, we'll have to have an environmental impact review.
An environmental impact.
Impact review.
When they decide to break up that large lot, if they do
Okay.
develop that, if the flow is over 2,000 gallons per day, then it will have to go through PRI at that point.
Yeah, because of where it's located.
Yes.
It's the 3-acre lot you're talking about.
The residential side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
is there any, are there any comments by any members of the planning board on this A&R?
No comment, Mr.
No
Chairman.
comment? Alan, any?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point for the record for Mr. McParland, the owner's unknown to the north of the lot. If we could just,
Oh, yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I know that's a little hobby of yours.
I know it is.
Yeah, Zero Hall's Path, you notice the Hall's Path around yeah, that's interesting.
No taxes collected on those
Yeah,
lots.
gee.
Just,
They probably will, they'll
Yeah.
appear.
They'll come at it.
They'll come right out of the woods.
Yep.
yeah.
That's
Okay.
all I had,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman.
Okay,
Yes.
that's really a great observation. Anything, any other comments? Mr. Harris, do you have anything?
No.
So, I guess the one question, and Charlene, I'm not sure where we would stand on this, but I would wonder, I mean, as I understand anyway, this lot is 1-B, correct? This is what we're talking about, or we're talking about on the other
Well,
side?
It used to
1A.
be all one parcel.
Yeah, okay.
And so they're dividing it into 2 parcels, so it's gonna be Lot 1A and Lot 1B.
Okay, so there's, I mean, according to rule and law, everything here is according to code, right?
Yes.
So there's,
If it was not, I would
Because
definitely
it's
let
so
you know
big.
that.
yeah,
So much of it.
so then it doesn't require us, for example, like, we were in the situation at our last meeting with the folks from Depot in West Harwich, Depot Road, where they were concerned about what was going to be put on a piece of property, so we can't really even discuss that.
You really can't, and that's, that's one of the drawbacks of an approval not required plan. There's no notification to butters. As long as you have frontage and adequate access, the board is really incumbent upon them to endorse it as an approval not required plan.
Yeah.
But, Mr. Chairman, so
Sir.
I'm assuming to the east, the Harwich Developers LLC,
Those have frontage.
yeah, so.
That's where the
Route
frontage is.
137.
Yeah, so that's
So
gonna.
it's on 137. Yeah, that's the
Yep.
way I read it too, Alan. And,
Sure, this is Dave. I have a question on lot 1B.
Yep.
Where is the access?
Lot 1B is to be transferred to a property that is also in the commercial district that has frontage on Route 137.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's not shown on the drawing, is it?
No, they don't have to.
yeah.
Okay.
That'll come back once the lots are combined
Right.
before the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
It's still in the works as to
Yeah.
Yeah.
who they're selling it to.
Yeah, and then the other is, there's no, I mean, what I don't want is the appearance that this board isn't listening to, to everybody concerned, and I understand the folks that were here a couple of weeks ago, voicing their concerns about what's gonna go in there, and that does not have to be disclosed by law or by rule. But I think, it's something that I certainly would, as if I were on Spence's Trace or adjoining, I'd want to know, and I'd like to, think that,
Things are a little bit different because this isn't a water recharge area.
yep,
So that when and if this ever comes forward as a commercial development,
Yep.
they will have to disclose what the use is, so that we are sure that it does not, fall foul to uses that are prohibited within that district.
correct.
So
Hence the environmental.
that's the environmental part of that. When something's outside of water recharge, not a lot you can do. If it's in a water recharge, then,
Yeah,
you
okay.
can really scrutinize it.
Mary?
From my perspective, this is really just a very large lot that the owner wants to do something with the two separate sides differently, and under the general laws,
Not much we
he
can
can
do.
apply for an
He
approval
can-
not required.
Yeah, right.
So,
He can do it.
He can do it. He's entitled to that, so. Any comments or?
No, again, once it does get combined into a full plan, and it's in very early stages, then that would come back to
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
board.
okay.
Yeah.
So Charlene, what do we do at this point? Just,
I do believe that the board should vote to endorse this as an approval not required plan.
okay. Do I
And
hear,
I do,
Move to endorse the A&R plan entitled Plan of Land in Harwich, Mass., prepared for Paul Cuddy, trustee, prepared by Moran Engineering Associates LLC, dated 2/25/19, scale 1 to 40.
Second.
okay, so by roll call, Mr. Harris?
Question, procedural question, do we have to vote on the findings first?
we'll do that after.
Yep.
Okay, all right, aye.
Aye, and Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Ms. Maslowski?
aye.
Mr. Peters?
Aye.
Mr. Joyce? Aye. So that carries.
Move to adopt the following findings. Said plan does not constitute a subdivision as the way shown on a plan, a public way, provides safe and adequate access.
Second.
Okay, we'll take a vote on this via roll call. Mr. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. McFarland?
Aye.
Ms. Maslowski?
Aye.
Mr. Peters?
Thank
Aye.
you.
Mr. Joyce? Aye.
Okay, now you need to do some signing. So Joe, if you wanna
Sure.
start the paper ones, and then I'll get the Mylar ready for you.
Okay.
Is the application date the
How's
27th?
it run during TV right now?
2/27/19.
Thank you. Please don't get your lollipop on.
Yeah, I throw it away.
Do you want me-
Thank
Are
you.
you done? All right,
Yeah, I'm
I'll
done.
do that.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead, bud. Okay. Mary, you want-
Run right up and record it.
Get paid first.
Oh, yeah.
No, but every professional agrees with you.
I mean, the amendments of bylaws that go to, the bylaws before me, the interesting talk before me, that goes to the town meeting.
That'll then go to the town meeting.
Then
If it's
goes-
approved at town meeting, then it gets sent to the Attorney General.
Attorney General,
Yep.
okay. And, so in the meantime, the planning board is still taking applications here for special permits?
Actually, now that it's been advertised, it falls under the proposed bylaw.
Oh, going to the new,
This is
okay.
where it gets very confusing.
Until the Attorney General signs, or
No, now that
things
it's
are
been
kind of held
advertised.
up until the Attorney General.
Things can be, but somebody can come in for an application under the new bylaw, because it's been published since the first date of publication. If, however, the Attorney General, if town meeting denies it, then you gotta go back to the drawing board with the building permit. If it is approved and then the Attorney General finds that there was a procedural error, then you're also back to the drawing board.
So now it would just be applied for at the building. It doesn't come before the board.
It would not, but if for some reason town meeting denied it, then if you started an accessory apartment, you would have to go back to this board, who hopefully would then approve it, otherwise you've got a new building that you're, and these,
Tearing
this,
down.
these are not my regulation, this is Mass General Law, which is,
Support seems strong for the bylaw.
I hope so.
Wasn't even any opposition for interest.
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan.
So, the next,
There are no minutes, my
minutes.
apologies. Katie had them done, I just could not get to them.
It's okay.
To finalize them,
we'll get those.
and she's doing a great job on those, thank you.
Yes, Katie, thank you very much, as always. Any advisory opinions?
Nope.
Anyone? Any old business? Mr. McParland?
I just wanted, for the record, Mr. Chairman, say that since we had that initial hearing on that matter up on Route 28,
Yes.
I've received a number of calls.
You should, it's
Comment,
it's not before the
I'm not gonna
board.
discuss it, it's not
Yeah.
before us.
And also, I would caution board members that if people are calling them, to refer them to
They should come to
the
the
planning office.
planning office.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No. I'm an appointed member of the planning board. If somebody calls me, I answer them. No, I tell them if they want to, they can call you, but, so, that's
Yeah.
why I'm a member of this board.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've had the same sorts of things happen, Joe, and I've listened, but.
That's what I think, yeah.
Yeah, you have to listen, but at the same time, I've also advised, please get in touch with the planning,
If you have any
planning office.
further questions,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Your next meeting is March 26th. It is a very, very heavy agenda,
Okay.
so I hope you are all going to be able to participate. As of
We have a continued case on
You
that
have a
date.
continued, and you've
Yeah,
got a whole bunch of other
continuance.
ones, too. So it is a heavy agenda. Right now, you have the filing deadline from April 9th. There are
Correct.
no new cases, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Okay, any other briefings or reports by any board member?
This is Dave. I have a question for Charlene.
Okay.
In one of the previous minutes, I recall it mentioning that while I was on the phone, I could vote, but my presence was not counted as a quorum. Is that correct?
There has to be a physical quorum present here, you know, in this room. So if there were only
Okay.
3 people here, you would not count towards that quorum. However, your vote is important if, for instance, like this evening, if there was a special permit before the board, it would require a vote of 5 in the affirmative. So if you were not on the phone, the board could not move forward with a special permit application. Does that
All
make
right,
sense?
thank you for clarifying
Okay.
that. It stuck
So
in
yes.
my mind after reading that, but I'd never talked to you about it.
Yeah, you are important.
Yeah, we need
I'm
you
only
there.
semi-important.
No, you're important.
You're important.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns from the planning board?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second, all in favor, starting with Mr. Harris? By roll
Aye.
call? Aye. Joe?
Aye.
Mary?
Aye,
Alan?
Aye.
Mr. Joyce, aye.
we had done.